All right, everybody, welcome to your One Book Show. I hope everybody is having a great week. It's almost the end of the week. It's Thursday. Let's mute that. And thanks for joining me. I am in a little, I guess, enclave off the exhibit hall at Freedomfest in South Dakota, in Rapid City, South Dakota, where well, this is day 2, I guess, of the conference, and we'll be moving into. There's still, I think, a couple more days, although I'm leaving, so I will not be here for the rest of the conference. I'm going to be heading back to Puerto Rico tomorrow morning, and it's this conference is interesting. It's interesting. It's you've got the whole rainbow of different types of libertarians are here represented. You've got conservatives, and it's just this mishmash of people who have a lot in common, don't have a lot in common, a lot of religion, but Atheists for Liberty is an organization that is represented here, and there's really a wide variety of people at Freedom Fest. So I often refer to it as a zoo. It feels like all kinds of stuff is going on, all kinds of people pitching their wares, all kinds of talks, some of them good, some of them not so good, but an opportunity to kind of get the whole spectrum of, what some people call right wing, or what you would call generally people who think they're for pro-free markets. Scott calls them the coalition of the unwoke. No, because there are quite a few people who are unwoke who are not here, who associate themselves more with left of center than with the ideas here. Anyway, it's been interesting. I met a lot of people. I met some of you, some people who listen regularly to the podcast, some people who have followed me for years. It's always fun to see people. I've done some book signings, I've signed some books. We have a booth. The Ironman Institute has a booth here. We hand out a lot of free copies. I've done 3 different events. I did a talk yesterday on kind of the questions, the philosophical questions that liberty gives rise to. So, I thought it was a, I thought it was an interesting topic and a really good talk, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, about what I covered there. Jonathan is just doing a shameless plug, so I might as well do a shameless plug for Jonathan. He's going to be on Fox Business at 7:15 p.m. Central Time. I'm not sure what's so special about today. Jonathan, you're always on Fox Business. Is this like an additional appearance, something in addition? But you should all watch Jonathan and support Jonathan, and support his work on getting the word out there. He does a magnificent job on Fox to present a capitalist perspective on things, which Fox doesn't have, unfortunately. So Jonathan is one of the few on the channel who actually brings that perspective to the show. All right, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you all for providing the support. Some of the support goes to funding this trip to Freedom Fest, although I'm getting paid for some of the events here. And, and of course, Ali is here. And we know that when Ali's here, we have a goal, and the goal is $400. And so hopefully we'll be able to meet that goal today. I'm going to rely a little bit today because I haven't really prepared a full show. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my impressions of Freedom Fest, about what I've done, a little bit about the talks I've given, and things like that. But I don't really have a full-out program. There's some newsy items that we could talk about that I think are worthwhile talking about. We can get to them. So we can do a hodgepodge of different things today. But a lot of that is going to rely on you asking questions. So I'm happy to answer your questions about politics, about anything you want. On the Super Chat, we've got the Super Chat here, and of course, the more money you put on these Super Chat questions, the better. And again, the more likely it is that I answer the questions. So yes, we have to reach $400 today. Allie's in charge. She's going to run the show, and she's going to make sure you live up to her expectations. All right, so I did a talk yesterday on kind of the issues, the philosophical issues related to liberty, and I thought it went really, really well. We had a good audience, good sized audience. A lot of people who I think a few kind of objectivist people who are familiar with Ayn Rand, but a lot of people not familiar with Ayn Rand, not familiar with my ideas, not familiar with me, who just attended the session. And I really started out, and this is a good question to ask yourself, and a good question to ask libertarians and conservatives and people who claim to be for freedom and for liberty. It's a good question just to ask them to kind of, because nobody is asking these kind of questions. And the question is, why do you care about liberty? Why do you care about freedom? And it's interesting, because I asked the question to the audience, and I waited for them to give me answers, and the answers were very unsatisfying. They don't really know. It kind of feels good. They want it. And one of my comments was that, yeah, the left thinks their stuff feels good, and they want it. But why liberty? Why freedom? Of course, we also talked about how do you define freedom and why, all the different definitions of freedom and how the left thinks they're for freedom and why they're wrong and what freedom constitutes, and all of that is important. But I think this question of why be free is one that people don't typically ask. We implicitly assume, well, of course you want to be free. But is it? Of course. In most of human history, people are not free. Most of human history, people demand to be free. Most people today don't really know what freedom is. They'll all say, yes, I'm for freedom and liberty, but not really. Not when you stop pushing. So freedom is not self-evident. It's not obvious. It's not, we're all born with freedom in our hearts and, people repress it, but we really all want to be free. No. It wasn't clear to me at all that when we invaded Iraq, the Iraqis wanted to be free. That freedom was running in their blood and they were just waiting for an opportunity to be free. They certainly didn't show that. No, freedom is an achievement. Freedom is a particular perspective on life. It's a particular perspective that generates a desire for freedom, that generates a demand for freedom. So, freedom, of course, is what? Well, again, I asked, what is freedom? And it was shocking. Again, this is a libertarian, conservative group. People didn't know. They did not have an answer to the question of what is freedom. I mean, you're probably getting a reverb because of the room. This room is more reverb than the room I was in before. But I don't know, let me see if I do this. Does this make any difference? Yeah, no. Any volume now? Any sound now? So freedom is the absence of coercion. But it's not just the absence of coercion. That's way too negative. Freedom is that condition in which man can pursue his own values based on his own thinking, in pursuit of his own happiness. So freedom is a condition, right? Freedom is a condition under which we can pursue, with no limitations, with no permission, having to ask permission, and with the knowledge that force will not be used against us, pursue our values based on our reason, in pursuit of our happiness. Right? And that's what freedom's for. So why freedom? Why freedom? Because I want to pursue my happiness. Why freedom? Because I want to be able to pursue my values on my terms. Because freedom is a prerequisite for achieving my values, and therefore a prerequisite for happiness. So you can see now that to truly be pro-freedom, one has to recognize its self-interested, morally egoistic roots. At the end of the day, the reason for freedom is so that individuals can pursue their values, their life, and think, invent, create based on their judgment. It's completely egoistic, and of course the Founding Fathers knew this. It's why you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, your happiness as an individual. They didn't have a theory of egoism. They didn't promote a theory of egoism. But they fundamentally had that idea. So why freedom? Because it's the only social condition under which I and you can pursue our own individual values free of coercion so that we can attain our own happiness. That's why freedom. It's no collectivistic reason. It's not a subjective reason. It's not an emotional reason. And of course, what I walked them through is more than that. Because one of the questions I asked is, in a sense, what is freedom primarily protecting? Or another way to ask the question, or another, not exactly a way to ask the question, but another approach, is to ask the question, in order to achieve your values, in order to be successful in living and in life, in order to live a good life, a flourishing life, a successful life, what do you need? In other words, what makes you human? And again, it's interesting. People don't know the answer. You know, to me, if you say, what makes somebody human? It's obvious. What's the difference between human beings and animals? It's obvious. They go round and around and around. It's the mind. It's our capacity to reason. It's our rational faculty. That's what makes human beings human beings. So once you understand that, then you ask the question, well, what is the enemy of reason? What's the enemy of rationality? Force, coercion, authority. Well, then we value freedom, should value freedom, because we value the mind. We value the human mind. That's why we value freedom. And we value the human mind because we value ourselves. We value our happiness. We value what it means to be a human being. And of course, you can see how philosophical this is, because there's an epistemological point. Man's basic need of survival is reason. There's a moral point. My happiness is my moral purpose. And then there's a political point. Freedom. The political system structured to protect your mind and your pursuit of happiness. Which is the same thing, right? So it was a good talk. What can I say? We got a good response from the audience. And again, it was a relatively audience that didn't have the answers. I mean, there were some objectivists there, and they kept quiet, luckily. Yeah, just to point to objectivists who come to live talks, if I ask a question you're not supposed to answer, the whole point is to get the answers from the non-objectivists. So please, don't be obnoxious and give all the right answers. That defeats the pedagogical point of asking the question and getting the wrong answers. Drives me nuts. I have an objectivist up front, first row. Every time I ask a question, he gives me gold speech right there. Right? Get a life. You don't have to show me how smart you are. It's not the purpose of asking the question. If you're all objectivists, I'd be giving a different talk. All right. So that was the talk yesterday. I then was on a panel on how to create jobs without government intervention, which seemed like a weird title because all government intervention does is destroy jobs. So just get the government out of the way and jobs are created. But we went through particulars, lower taxes, particular regulations, how those work out. So that was good, but it wasn't as interesting. And it was me and 3 other economists on the stage talking about this stuff. So it was interesting. It was interesting, and some of the commenters were pretty good. And then today I did a rematch of my debate with John Mackey. So we did a round 2. And I have to say, I wasn't particularly happy with round 2. So I don't think I did very well. I don't know exactly why. Anyway, I didn't, I didn't do that well. And so my view is we need a round 3. So my plan is to do a round 3 in Austin, Texas, sometime in the fall at the University of Texas in Austin, and I'm going to do much better. I think I figured out what the problem is. This is the problem, and it's. And I thought I figured out last time, but obviously not, because it didn't. I didn't have good examples. I didn't have a good way to manifest it. But basically, it's this point. Purpose. So one of the questions Mackey asked me, which is a good question, and I think I gave a decent answer, but I could have done an even better one. Mackey asked the question of, were Dagny and Reardon in Atlas Shrugged, were they motivated by making a profit? Was that their primary motivation? Was that why they were in business? And my answer is, was, and is, no. We as individuals, our purpose is not just to make money. We have all kinds of purposes. Some of us want to, we want to change the world. We want to impact the customers in a particular way. We want to create a new metal. We want to run a railroad. We want to run a railroad. And that's our personal purpose. And entrepreneurs are not driven by money. It's not true that Silicon Valley entrepreneurs start companies to make money. I mean, they want to make money, but that's not the reason they do it. They have all kinds of reasons why they do it. But once you start a business, the purpose of the business is to make money. It's what a business is. It's what characterizes a business versus any other type of enterprise. It's there to make money. So the differences between the personal and the business. So Reardon, for example, creates this new metal, and he could just give it to Dagny. Dagny's in trouble. She needs it. She's building a railroad. He loves Dagny, and he wants to see the railroad succeed. He could just give the money. I mean, I think personally, he would do that. But he's running a business. He's running a business. And he charges her a good amount of money, if you remember right. He makes a nice profit on selling her Reardon's metal, because that's the business he's in. So I think I need to do a better job differentiating personal purpose from the business's purpose. And I think he conflates the two. And it's even true that employees might go to a business because they love the product, they love the company, they love whatever. They're not necessarily there to make money for shareholders. But that's the job of the CEO. The job of the CEO is to make money for shareholders, even though his personal purpose might be different. that's what he needs to do, qua CEO. So I need to be better at elaborating and giving examples of that. One of the examples that he gave, which I didn't really have time to respond to, it was a very short debate. It was like 50 minutes and it went like that. One of the points was about, he said, well, doctors don't treat their patients for the profit motive. They care about, they want to heal. And yeah, a doctor doesn't go into medicine to make a lot of money. It's not the motivation for him as an individual. But once he sets up the practice, he's in a healthy society. He's trying to make money. Now, the way to make money as a good doctor is to heal people. The more people he heals, the more money he'll make. The more successful surgeries he does, the more money he makes. If he cuts corners, if he becomes short-sighted, he's going to do damage to his patients, and he won't make money. So yes, I want a doctor who has a personal motivation around caring, but also incredibly knowledgeable. But I want a doctor who also wants to be successful. And the manifestation of success is profit. Whoops. This light, which was working perfectly in California, keeps falling now, which is weird. I don't know why. It was so good in California, and now it's falling. All right, let's see. So anyway, so I need to rethink some of my presentation around this debate, so that when I do this at the University of Texas, it's a slam dunk. It's a slam dunk. Let's see. All right. Okay, so we've got a bunch of questions. I'm going to do those. I'm going to go over these. We'll start with the $20 questions, and we'll go from there. And then I thought I just browse down like Google News and make some commentary on the news of the day. There's some big issues I want to talk about, but probably not. Today is not the time to do it. Probably not going to be doing a super long show today as well. But we're at $117, so there's $300 more to go. Hopefully some of you will ask some questions with significant dollars associated with them. You can ask me questions about anything, about politics, about economics, about morality, about anything you want. I'm not sure I can answer everything, but please feel free to ask the questions and jump in. If anybody wants to do $50, $100, that'll be great, because that'll get us to our goal even faster. Okay, Michael asks, did Israel violate sovereignty by going into Argentina to capture Eichmann? Or was Argentina wrong for allowing him sanctuary? Did you watch Eichmann's trial as a child? Was Israel wrong in giving him the death penalty? No, I don't think they violated the sovereignty, partially because Argentina was ruled at the time by a dictator. So in my view, it has no sovereignty. Dictators have no sovereignty. Regimes which are dictatorial are not sovereign regimes. It doesn't mean anything. You get your legitimacy, your sovereignty from the consent of the people. The founding fathers understood this. And that consent was never given to the military regimes that ran Argentina at the time. Certainly Argentina was wrong for allowing a monster like Eichmann sanctuary. And if a government is willing to defend a mass murderer like that and not being willing to then, to hell with the sanctuary, you do what's in your self-interest. You go in there and you get him out and you do what you need to do. Did you watch Eichmann trial as a child? No, I mean, it was what? It was 62 or 3? I was like 1 or 2 years old, so I was really... Was Israel wrong in giving him the death penalty? No, absolutely not. I mean, he's clearly guilty. There's no question about his guilt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. It was certainty that he did what he said he did, what was said he did. Absolutely deserve the death penalty. People who kill, people who murder, people who do it on a large scale deserve the death penalty. There's no question about it. I mean, I think any murderer deserves the death penalty. My only objection to the death penalty is a possibility of being mistaken or being wrong. All right, thanks, Michael. That was a good question. Michael also asks, to the general public, objectivism seems beyond the pale. To me, it's just as obvious as 2 + 2 = 4. Maybe I spend too much time in the objectivist bubble, but I don't want to leave it because outside it is lunacy and depravity. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you for not wanting to leave the bubble. I have to leave the bubble because I have to deal with it, because that's my job, is to go out of the bubble and engage with people who don't get it, who don't have these ideas, who've not accepted them yet. That's what I do. But it is very difficult. Now, as you get older, I find that it's easier to understand other people. These issues that when you're young seem so self-evident are more complicated, require a lot of thinking, require effort. And you've got an entire culture, an entire world dedicated to the opposite of objectivism, to anti-objectivist ideas. And it's very easy for somebody it's very difficult for somebody to embrace a philosophy that's so opposed by almost everybody. I mean, even here at Freedomfest, there's so many differences, even when you find some commonality. All right, Alf Stewart, another $20 question, thank you. Is there such a thing as intrinsic value? Do objectivists call it objective value? Well, we call something objective value, but there's no such thing. I mean, we would say there's no such thing as an intrinsic value. Value in and of itself. Because Einman said, whenever you get a value question, is this a value? The question has to be, to whom and for what? To whom and for what? And what gives its objectivity is that if you can answer the to whom and for what, it's a value to, I don't know, honesty is a value to whom? Well, to human beings. It's a universal value. For what? For attaining your happiness, for attaining your for survival, for flourishing. So, it's not intrinsic in human beings. It requires the recognition of human nature, the identification of human nature, to identify that something like honesty is a value. And the same is true of, is a Ferrari a value? Well, to whom and for what? People who hate small, they get claustrophobic cars, they're scared of driving fast. The Ferrari's not a value. Is a COVID vaccine a value? Well, it depends on who you are, how old you are. Are you sensitive to things like vaccines? Are you allergic to medication? I mean, again, how old are you? So there's no value in the thing itself. The value is something that is in the thing that you value. That it's this interaction between your consciousness, you, to whom, and then you also have to know for what, right? Is a Ferrari valuable to me? I like to drive fast. I like all of that. Not in Puerto Rico. It's not a value to me in Puerto Rico. If I got a Ferrari, I'd sell it. Because you can't do the things that you need to do with a Ferrari. You'd fall in a pothole and never be seen again in Puerto Rico. Is it a value in Germany? Yeah, if I could drive a Ferrari on the highways in Germany, absolutely. So a Ferrari is not a value in and of itself. It needs somebody to value it. But it's not subjective either. It's not whatever I feel like. It's I value it because of its characteristics and because of what it can contribute objectively to me in my life. So that's the issue of value. Thank you all for the question. Cook, thank you for the support. Okay, Joe, read Anthem last night and really liked it. Yeah, it's a great little book. I haven't heard you comment on it. What are your thoughts? On topic, do you think it was something unique to offer on egoism and freedom? Or do her other works address it better. So first, I think it's a wonderful book. It's an exciting, emotional story. It has this amazing arc from pure, total collectivism to individualism, discovery of individualism, the embracing of individualism. I just gave away the plot, sorry. It's a dystopian novel. It's very effective in conveying these ideas to young people. I don't know, does it offer something unique that other books don't? Not philosophically, but aesthetically it does, and that's hugely important. You don't read aesthetics just for the philosophy. You read the book to be inspired. So there's a certain element of inspiration associated with reading a novel versus reading a nonfiction book. And as that, yes, it inspires. It inspires in maybe slightly different ways that Atlas Shrugged and a Fountainhead might. And in that sense, it adds to the conversation. It's easy to read. It's quick to read. It's a book a 16, 14-year-old could read and get something out. It's a great introduction to the question of collectivism versus individualism. So I'm a big fan of Anthem for particularly young people, though, yeah, it's fun to read, even if you're not young, as an introductory book to her ideas. I think it's beautifully written. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Let's see, what was the other question, Joe? Do you think it has something unique? Oh, yeah, I answered that. Okay. Sonny asks, when should the government print money? Or do you believe we should be able to decentralize our currency and make our own? Woodrow Wilson made it illegal to transact using gold. I already paid $15. Yeah, I saw that. You'd asked this question before. There it is. All right, so we got a double. All right, thank you. So it wasn't Woodrow Wilson who made it illegal to transact in gold. It was FDR. Not only transacting gold, FDR made it illegal to own gold, to hold gold. He confiscated all the gold in America. I mean, people hid it, but the stuff that wasn't hidden, he confiscated. I mean, he paid for it, but it's still confiscation. He didn't do it with consent. All right, let's just see. Sorry, I'm just trying to copy everything over. So, I think government should never print money. Government should not have the ability. It's not its responsibility. Government's role is to protect individual rights. It doesn't need to print money to protect individual rights. Money should be printed by private enterprise. And the private enterprise that makes the most sense to print money and the private enterprise that printed money historically are banks. So banks should issue money. Indeed, if you look at pre-1914, pre-Woodrow Wilson, the Federal Reserve was established during his presidency. Pre the Federal Reserve, banknotes, dollar bills, had the name of the bank that had issued them, that had printed them, on them. And you could take that dollar note and you could exchange it for gold. And I think that's the right system. Private banks should issue money, back it by whatever backing they think is appropriate. The market would determine whether people are willing to accept the backing, willing to accept these people paper in exchange. It will probably be gold. And government has no business in the business of money or the business of economics or the business of business. So all money would be private money. All money would be issued by private actors. And whether you would want to accept that money in exchange would depend on the quality of the people issuing the money. And the market would very quickly aggregate to a few issuers of money. Not every bank would issue its own currency, but a lot of banks would. And those few, a lot or few, whatever the banks were, they would be the highest quality, and they would be the quality that the market trusted. So a dollar would be a dollar, would represent a certain weight in gold, no matter who issued it. But we're a long way from that. I don't think individuals would ever issue money, because why would I accept it? What are you guaranteeing the money with? And how do I know you will? Right? So this is where you need a business called a bank to do that. I hope that answered your question, Sonny. Yep. Appreciate the support. All right, Alex asks, had a mini debate today with observant Jew who believes there can be no objective morality without God. I think I had a good rebuttal, but would like to hear how you would give a short answer to that. Thanks for everything you do. I think morality cannot be objective with God. Because any morality that assumes God assumes the arbitrary. It assumes somebody spoke to God one day and told us what morality is and isn't. We don't speak to God. We don't have direct access. We can't prove the morality in reality. It's just being told to us. Somebody said, I spoke to God. This is what he wants you to do. So I'm just believing it. There's no objectivity there. There's no reality there. There's no proof. There's no science. There's no pointing. I read it in the book. Somebody told me they talked to God. It's completely arbitrary. And in that sense, it's completely subjective. Which religion do I accept? What did God say to me versus what he said to these other people? And of course, even when God speaks directly to people, like God in the Ten Commandments, which come later, I know, but God in the Ten Commandments says, thou shalt not kill. That's a commandment. So you think, thou shalt not kill, that's what morality is. But if God tells you to kill, then it's okay. Because throughout the Old Testament, God is telling people to kill. Tells the Jews to kill these people, and those people tells Abraham to kill his son. So is it moral if God tells you? So no. Religious morality is subjective and arbitrary. And what we try to do, what Ayn Rand tries to do, and you can argue whether she succeeds or not, but what she's doing is linking morality to facts, to reality. In that sense, she's linking morality to science. She's bringing science into the equation. So Rand is making morality, or at least trying to make morality, objective. And then the debate is it or isn't it? But then the debate is about the specifics. Evil Black Cat, I see your super chat. I've got it copied over. I will get to it. But it's a $5 question, so it does not have priority. So I'm doing the $20 questions first. Then I'm going to do all the other questions that came before yours, and then I'll get to yours. So, it's not a very long list of questions. So thank you, Alex. That is a very generous contribution. I'm curious how you answered the question and whether you were satisfied with the way you asked the question and how different was it from the way I did. Capitalist Nick asks, 20 Canadian dollars is almost 20 Americans, I'll count it. AOC is selling Tax the Rich t-shirts online to woke followers for $58 a shirt. $58 a shirt. She's going to get rich. She hypocritically claims she is not engaging in capitalism as the t-shirts are non-profit. She denies capitalism to push socialism. And he thought, she's not engaging in capitalism. Look, trade doesn't equal capitalism. The fact that I sell something for profit is not capitalism. That's buying into Richard Wolff's view of capitalism. He says we've always had capitalism. Capitalism has existed forever, so he blames every sin of mankind on capitalism, because to him it's a system that's always existed, because we've always had markets, we've always had trade, we've always sold things for profit. So she's not doing capitalism. I would never accuse her of that. She is engaging in what everybody's always engaged in the marketplace, selling stuff for profit. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is a system. A system in which the government protects individual rights, primarily property rights. A system which all property is owned by individuals. A system in which there's a separation of state from economics. $58 a shirt is an expensive shirt, but I don't begrudge her that. Particularly if she's doing it for a nonprofit, why not? So I don't find hypocrisy a particularly interesting argument. All right, Let's see. Okay, back to some below $20 super chat questions. Recently was Bastille Day. What's your view on this day? Liberty, fraternity, equality, in contrast to July 4th, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I mean, that is a whole talk that deserves a book. It's a rich topic, but generally, I'm very opposed to the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a revolution of Rousseau, a revolution that was an antithesis of individualism. It was about equality, not equality before the law, not equality of rights, but there is no recognition really of individual rights. I think Thomas Jefferson, one of his biggest sins, maybe his biggest sin, was his positive view of the French Revolution. It was violent. It was it killed people in huge numbers that were unnecessary for the revolution to be successful. And it because it was primarily collectivist, because it was motivated by revenge, because it was not principled enough, focused on the protection of individual rights and on establishing a rights-protecting form of government. Because of all that, it deteriorated into bloodshed and very quickly failed and very quickly, was taken over by a dictator, which was Napoleon. Right? On the flip side of that, the American Revolution was fundamentally a revolution about individual rights. The American Revolution was fundamentally a moral revolution with the right basic morality. It was a revolution that was sustainable because it was a revolution about freedom. It wasn't a revolution that was about bloodshed. It wasn't a revolution about authoritarianism. And it was a revolution that rejects explicitly the idea of collectivism. Well, implicitly, the idea of collectivism. Embraces explicitly the idea of individualism. And that's why it's survived and that's why it's thrived. So 4th of July is definitely a day to celebrate. Bastille Day is not a date to celebrate. Okay, Michael. We're not living under a mixture of altruism and egoism. We're living under a mixture of altruism and narcissism. So few have the self-awareness or self-esteem to be proper egoists. I agree completely. There's very little true egoism out there. There's narcissism. There's elements of doing self-interest, but it's so small and it's so easy to confuse with narcissism. Yeah, it's a mess philosophically. Michael asks, was apartheid in South Africa worse than segregation in the American South? Yeah, I think so. I think quite a bit worse. And interesting in the sense that the whites in South Africa were a tiny minority relative to the blacks, and yet they managed to institute this apartheid against the majority. The minority instituted against the majority. I think it was worse, although Jim Crow was certainly bad in the South. But it was much more institutionalized in South Africa. It was much more part of the culture and part of the norm and part of everything. It was the entire country. It was the entire government. Blacks were excluded by law from many, many, many things and many professions and activities. So yes, I think apartheid was definitely worse than segregation in the South. What is your evaluation of Tim Sandefur and his work? I mean, I've met Tim. I like Tim. Most of his work I like. I like some of the stuff he's done on aesthetics. I like some of the other stuff. I disagree with him, I think, if I read his work right, about intellectual property, which he seems to dismiss. But I might be wrong. I think that's his position. Yeah, I'm basically positive about Tim. I see no reason to say anything negative. All right, Gail asks, yes, I agree we need to articulate concisely the path from freedom to human flourishing. Yes. And that the justification for freedom, the reason we want freedom, is because we want to flourish. Human flourishing is the justification for working, for establishing freedom. All right, Evil Black Cat, we got to your question. If Cubanos had not given up their right to own firearms 60 years ago, do you believe they would be in the same situation they are today? Yeah. What does this right to firearms protect you exactly? What does it mean that they gave up their right to firearms? That they agreed with the existing regime that changed, the ideas that changed, and were willing to hand over their guns. And if they weren't willing to hand over their guns, Do you think Castro would have taken the guns away from them? Yes. Would they have fought against Castro? No. Because they agreed with him to a large extent. He won the Civil War. This idea that guns are primary, I think is completely wrong. Completely wrong. And guns will not protect your liberty. And indeed, people have, for the last 100 years in America, been giving up liberty left and right. We've just gone through lockdowns. We regulate it to death. Taxes are increasing. We get more regulations, more taxes constantly. But we have our guns. So when the dictator takes over, we'll still have our guns, but we won't have freedom. Guns do not protect freedom. You give up your freedom way before you give up your guns. The reason the Cubans agreed to give up their guns was because they'd already given up on freedom. So guns, I don't know any example where guns are used to protect freedom without a philosophy of freedom guiding the process. The problem in America is not a lack of guns. The problem in Cuba is not a lack of guns. The problem in Cuba and America is a lack of ideas. It's that people don't believe in those ideas. But it's not even the right of self-defense. What do you consider self-defense? Is somebody coming to your house and raping your wife, that would be self-defense? Yes, everybody agrees. But if somebody comes to your house and they say, I'm from the government, and takes your money, is that self-defense? Would you fight for that? No. We know that's not the case. If somebody tells you you can't say certain things, is fighting them self-defense? No, that's not self-defense. So what is the definition of self-defense? And that is completely ideological. And if you have the wrong view of self-defense, you'll have the wrong ideology, then you'll give up your freedom and still have your gun. So what? What good is the gun to you if you don't have freedom? So the Second Amendment is great, but it's not a primary, and it's not the most important issue, and it's not the thing to fight about. I mean, you want to protect the Second Amendment, but not when you've already given up on everything else. And that's what we have. We've given up on everything else. Brian, thank you. Really, really appreciate the contribution. We're at $296, so we need $100. Somebody could step in and do $100, and we're basically done. I've got 2 more questions. I could go over the news and give you some highlights on the news, which would be fun. But guns are there to defend yourself against crooks and robbers and bad men. Guns will not protect you against bad ideas, and that's the enemy. The enemy is bad ideas. And guns will not protect you from a government that is 1,000 times more powerful than you are. All right. Okay, a capitalist Nick asks, are you doing your debate with John Mackey? Yeah, I talked about it at the beginning of the show, so you could rewind and listen. How do you plan to better differentiate your pro-business point of view from his in the first debate? Can you ever so doing future pro-capitalist, pro-freedom projects together? Sure, I could imagine doing things together, but as I said, I didn't think I did a great job this debate. Hard for me to tell, hard for me to be objective, but we are planning a 3rd debate at the University of Texas in the fall, and I promise you I'll do a better job there. And the way to differentiate is well, we'll see. I mean, it's a good question. I care about business, and he opens the door to all the do-gooders to destroy business. Okay, Naveen asks, can a government that's not involved in economics be strong enough to be a monopoly on force? How would that work? Well, basically, they would ask you to participate in funding force, in funding a military, in funding a police, in funding a judiciary, in funding a legislature. And that's pretty much all you need to fund. And if all government did was focus on that one thing, on the monopoly over the use of retaliatory force, then it could be an expert on that. It could develop the skills for that, which is its strength anyway. And it wouldn't be distracted by a million other things. And it wouldn't be the one using force in initiation. It would only be using it to defend. So it would be funded through voluntary contributions or funded through fee for certain services. But I think it would have plenty of money. I mean, imagine if you could keep all your money and all I asked for you is to pay something towards your defense, police, and military. You'd give, I think people would give a lot more than what was needed. It's not that expensive. It's not that expensive. All right, that was the last question. So anybody who asks a question now, I will answer it. Jump in there. We're short about $100, 5 $20 questions, 2 $50 questions, $100 questions, and we're done. I am gonna quickly look over the news here and see if I have anything to say on the top stories in Google News. Oh, Thomas jumps in. I enjoyed your presentation with Frank Furetti. While there were differences of viewpoints, this is a kind of a debate, not really a debate, on woke and how to change woke and how to fight woke culture. And Thomas says, while there were differences of viewpoint, I didn't seem like you disagreed all that much. How was your take on that conversation? Yeah, I agree. I think we agreed on a lot. I think Frank is not very philosophical and doesn't get the source, the origin of the problem. He doesn't understand, I think, the depths and the best ways, therefore, that one needs in order to fight them. So, yeah, I liked Frank, and he was very thoughtful and very interesting and very good ideas in terms of the problems with woke. Good identifications. I'm looking forward to meeting him sometime. Excellent points. I'm not sure about what. Where can we see your appearances at Freedomfest? I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe they have a website. They seem to be taping some events, not everything. Unfortunately, I think the best thing I did was yesterday, and I don't think it was taped. Certainly not videotaped. Maybe audio taped, but I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it was taped. All right, we're down to $75. Let me say this before I go and before I do the news. On Sunday, I'm flying to Israel. For those of you in Israel, I will be doing a couple of events in Israel. So if you're interested in coming, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to shake your hand, sign a book, do something. My book, Free Market Revolution, is being published in Hebrew. You can already order it on Amazon. It will be at my events in Israel. So, come buy the book. I'll sign it for you. It'll be a good time. You can get information about those from Boaz Arad. Look him up. He's in Israel. He runs the Objectivist, the Ayn Rand Center Israel. And you can look up the Ayn Rand Center Israel. So I'll be doing that in Israel. I'll also be in London. So at August 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that, I will be in London. And we will be doing a couple of live events in London. So if you're in the UK, and I know some of you are in the UK listening to this, then again, I hope you come. I hope I meet you, shake your hand, sign a book, have a conversation, drink a pint of beer. Not me, you maybe. And there are going to be 2 events. I don't have the details yet. Follow the meetup or whatever of ARC UK. ARC UK will be putting these events on together with ARI Europe. So these will be 2 events in the UK in the first few days of August. I fly into London, I think, on the 4th. Now, all of this assumes that they let me in and that they don't have to quarantine. I don't have to do all this BS. But under those assumptions, I will be doing that. I do have a direct flight from Israel to London. London is not a Muslim city, Diego. If you've ever been to London, you know it's not a Muslim city. I love London. London's one of my favorite places in the world, and what a great city. What a great city. It's fun, great city to do business. I have quite a few investors in my fund from London. A great city to speak, a great city to be attacked by Antifa, which they did to me at King's College in London. And yeah, there are a lot of Muslims there, but who cares? Who frigging cares? There's so much good in London. I don't care. And as Thomas says, London has five 5 world-class orchestras. Have I seen them all? I've seen several of them. So I try to go to a concert when I'm in London. Last time I was there, I saw Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto with this Uzbeki, from Uzbekistan, pianist. Probably a Muslim. God, how can that happen? But an Uzbek pianist, he was fantastic. It was a really good performance of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto in London at this magnificent hall on the south side of the river. I forget the name of the hall. I've been there for a few concerts. Anyway, I love going to concerts in London. And sometimes you go to little churches. I like this place in London. What's it called? It's not going to come to me right now. But it's this little place where they do only chamber music. And I've seen the pianist Bell, Daniel Bell, Israeli, really great, not pianist, violinist. I'm doing this, and I'm amazing violinist. And I've seen other chamber music at this place. It's all chamber music, and it truly is fantastic. It's not called the Tower. It's in Marylebone. It's in Marylebone. And what is the name of it? It's the same name as the street it's on, and I can't remember. Joshua Bell. Thank you, Naveen. Of course, it's not Daniel Bell. Daniel Bell was a neocon intellectual in the 70s. Joshua Bell, the violinist, fantastic. So I love London. So I'm looking forward to being there. Okay, David asks, I was debating someone about privatization of the educational system here in Canada. I didn't know how to respond to what would happen to those who can't afford it and essentially end up falling through the cracks. Well, I think there are a number of ways to respond. One is, in a society where schools are private, who can't afford it? If we're that capitalist, if we're that free, here's an exercise I want you to do at home before the next show. Take your salary. No, take the poverty line in the United States. I don't know what it is, 24,000, 36,000, 18,000, whatever the level is. Okay. Now take that salary and over the next 20 years, grow it at 1% growth a year. And in about 20 years, the median salary or even the low-income salary is still going to be pretty low, right? In real terms, 1% real growth. Now take it and grow at 4%, because let's assume the economy is growing 4%. Now, there's no such thing as poverty. There's no such thing as people can't afford education, particularly if you do this over 100 years or 200 years. So under capitalism, we get so rich that everybody can afford to send their kids to school. Everybody, including the poor. And of course, the price of education goes down because productivity goes up. They invest more private schools, more competition, more investment in technology, more homeschooling, more schooling through YouTube, and the cost of education goes down. So first, under capitalism, almost everybody can afford. But what about those who can't, really can't? Orphans, really bad stuff happened to them. Well, that's where charity steps in. And one of my favorite things to do is to ask the audience, how many of you in the audience would be willing to pay into a fund, private charity fund, that paid for the education of kids who are falling through the cracks, kids who their parents could not afford or were not motivated to spend the money on school? How many of you would be willing to fund it? And almost every hand goes up. So why do I need a government bureaucracy? Not just to fund schools, but to manage schools, to determine curriculum, to establish all of that. So that's related to my first point. There is a fantastic book whose author I interviewed on this Yaron Brook show, so you can find it if you go back. There's this wonderful book called The Beautiful Tree. And The Beautiful Tree documents the existence of private schools in the poorest, worst slums of India and Nigeria. Parents who are willing, even though there are free public schools out there, they pay to have their kids educated within the slum. Now it's cheap because it's in the slum. And the parents pay. And almost no kids go without an education. And these are the poorest people in the world. And yet they get an education. So get a copy of It's a Beautiful Tree, I think it's called. where he documents this in great detail. So it's just not true. Not true. They might not go to school with an indoor swimming pool and a baseball field. But in terms of education, they get a better education than in public schools. All right, what are we? 3:47. I'm tempted to end here, but Ali would be mad at me. We need to get a 400. So I don't know what to do. I'm a little torn. Like, the exhibit hall's empty. Everybody's been kicked out. I'm the only person here. It's, it's a little spooky. Right? No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so there's another $10 from Joe. Thank you, Joe. Scholarship programs would provide this as well. Yeah, schools would have scholarship programs. They would, so certain students of ability would be able to get into some of the best schools, the most expensive schools on scholarships. Provide this as well. And we already have them. They would exist for primary education as well as in private schools. Absolutely. But a beautiful tree is such a good example of the fact that poor people care about education, are willing to fund their kids' education, and that poor teachers are willing to start schools in poor places at really low cost. All right, $40. Joe helped us a little bit, got us a little bit closer, but it's still $40. All right, let me see. Let's see. Let me pull up Google News. Let's see if I can pull up Google News. I had it here earlier. There's Google News. Let's just look at Google News. What's the top story in Google News? I know you guys are going to hate me. It just changed. Top story in Google News just changed. Okay, top story in Google News right now is that the FBI failed to fully investigate Kavanaugh allegations, say the Democrats. Democrats blast FBI as new details of the Kavanaugh inquiry are exposed. There was nothing for the FBI to do. This is something this guy did if he did it. I don't know, when he was a teenager. He's in his 40s today, 50s. We can't be held accountable for stuff we did as teenagers when so much time has passed. It is absurd and ridiculous. So, God, do all these Democrats want us to go back to the youth and find what they did when they were kids? I wish somebody would do it to them, just to get them back. So, they're going after Kavanaugh, they're going after the FBI. The FBI was politicized. Of course, Republicans claim the FBI was politicized in favor of the Democrats. The Democrats claim the FBI was politicized in favor of the Republicans. And it goes on and on and on forever. And yeah, the FBI could have investigated this more, but there has to be a time frame, an expiration. Now, if he'd murdered somebody, if he'd actually raped her, okay. But she never accused him of that. He assaulted her at 17. That's a bad thing. She should have filed charges then, and he should have been prosecuted then. You can't do this decades later and judge a 50-year-old based on what he did when he was 17. Is he qualified to be in the Supreme Court or not? Sorry, I never bought into that, none of that. And put aside the question of whether there was any objective information to justify an investigation. All right, second item. This was the first item before. U.S. sanctions Cuban officials over crackdown on protesters. Biden warns this is just the beginning. So Biden's been, moderately good on Cuba. The only bad thing the Biden administration has done with regard to Cuba is that they basically said they won't necessarily accept refugees. They won't accept them in. They'll send them back. That's awful, horrific. But in terms of condemning the Cuban regime, in terms of attacking their communism, in terms of not sanctioning Cuba, yeah. I mean, good. And I think the most important thing we can do with regard to Cuba is the bully pulpit. We need to make it clear to the Cuban people that we support them, that they have morality on their side, that they have us on our side, and then support any elements among the Cubans who live in America who want to go over and help, or want to supply them with weapons to help, or anything that can be done to help this revolution without literally sending American troops, which I'm not in support of. CIA director says he is escalating efforts to solve Havana syndrome mystery. That is where some people in the embassy we have an embassy in Havana? Well, we shouldn't have. Biden should bring everybody home. cut off diplomatic relations with given what they're doing to the demonstrators, cut off diplomatic relations. That's what I would do. But, I would have done that to half the countries in the world, or 3/4 of the countries in the world. Nobody listens to me. The Havana syndrome is this syndrome where people got these earaches and headaches who were in the embassy in Savannah, and they've never figured out what caused it. They think it was some kind of low-frequency thing that the Cubans did to mess with people's minds, but they've never proved it. Now they're more incentivized, I guess, to look into it. Good, and if it is the Cuban government, then again, that's an act of war. Then we should intervene and get rid of these communists. Wow, Chicago violence just continues and continues and continues and continues. The other interesting story I just want to say something about, and then I'll go to Corey's question, and then I'm gonna head out to get some food. I'm hungry. Where is that issue? Oh, in Dubai. This is a different story, but this is kind of cool. In Dubai, it's so hot that the government is using technology to create rain clouds to drop rain on the place. I love when you use technology to change the weather. I don't see it here, but I think the most interesting story, and in some ways the most important story right now, that I don't think enough people are paying attention to, because I think people are disincentivized to pay attention to, is a story about the spyware that this Israeli company developed that can live on your iPhone even when you never click on a link. It can completely infiltrate all of Apple or anybody's privacy settings. It can plant itself on the phone and provide whoever's spying on you with whatever information they want. And it turns out that a significant number of, they won't say whom, but either governments or criminal organizations or terrorist organizations, it's not clear, but my guess is it's mostly governments, have used this to spy on journalists, to spy on politicians, to spy some senior politicians within countries, on the list of people who probably were spied on. It's an Israeli company that develops this technology. It is Snowden's worst nightmare, and to the extent that this is sanctioned, and the CEO of this company, this is an arrogant Israeli, the CEO of the company has basically said, if you're not a criminal, what do you worry about? What? You don't get to spy on me to decide if I'm a criminal or not. My life is none of your business. I have a right to my own information, and in that sense, to my own privacy. So I think it's the biggest story, the fact that this technology exists, the fact that people are using it, the fact that governments are using it, and the fact that nobody's upset about it really scares the bejesus out of me. But this, to me, is the biggest story right now. We'll see, people are reporting on it. Maybe this will develop. Snowden was not a crook. Snowden is a hero. I'll do a show on Snowden sometime. So that is a big deal. Government spying on their own citizens, that is scary. And that is very problematic. All right, let's do these super chat questions that we got. Corey in Australia, who has put us over the 400. Thank you, Corey. I keep hearing different things about the tragedy of the commons. First, I see it being used to defend why socialism could not work. Then I hear it as being debunked by certain economists, and it is an example of why socialism could work. Well, the tragedy of the commons, the problem with the tragedy of commons, the tragedy of the commons is proof that socialism cannot work. The commons are not taken care of. The commons are ignored. The commons are dilapidated, and therefore, given that it's socialism, everything is in the commons. Everything is destroyed. Everything falls apart. Everything is, nothing is produced, nothing is created, nothing is built. My solution, and the problem of the commons is not being debunked. The debunking of the problem of the commons is only mechanisms to create private property. So a woman economist won a Nobel Prize a few years ago on so-called debunking the problem of the commons. So she showed that in relatively primitive tribes, what we from the outside see as a common piece of land that they're all grazing their cows on, they have a sophisticated mechanism of tracking who's what, who can use it when. They have a mechanism of very unsophisticated, very inefficient private property. And that's what makes it work. So the only way to get rid of the tragedy of the commons is to get rid of the commons. The solution to tragedy of the commons is to get rid of the commons. And the Nobel Prize winner won a Nobel Prize by showing that that's how these kind of tribes, that's how societies do it. That's how you get rid of the, so it's the opposite of socialism. It's the negation of socialism, is the solution to the tragedy of the commons. Your background, it makes it look like you're being held hostage. Yeah, they're gonna. This is the background in the room I'm in. It is what it is. I won't use this as my regular background, I promise. Karen, thank you. Karen, thank you. Very generous. Corey says, it is getting too late. If it's getting too late for you, Yuan, feel free to answer my question in your next live stream. No, that's fine. I got the question answered. Let's do LMF, and this will probably be the last question. Oh no, there's more coming in. It natively seems like property rights should entail that if someone creates a nuke, then they own it. But on the other hand, the government needs to keep them out of civilian hands. How do you draw the line in a principled way? You don't have a right to property if the only purpose of the property is destruction. And this is why I don't believe you have a right to have any kind of gun you want, right? You have a right to have a gun to defend yourself, that's it. You can't have a right to a nuke. The only purpose of a nuke is to nuke people. And as an individual, there's no purpose for you to have a nuke. You have no property over a nuke. So there's no property rights as applied to weapons of destruction, only to weapons of self-defense. So property rights are out. They just don't apply. It's not that they negate it, they just don't apply. Since you are a big foodie, what are your typical grab-and-go fast food venues and why? I don't do fast food venues. If I grab and go stuff, I take nuts. Whoops, it goes. I don't know, I'm gonna have to fix this. I don't know why it was working, this holder of a lamp. It was working so well while I was in California, and now this. So I don't know. Anyway, we'll keep trying putting it back, but that's my light. See, much better with the light. I travel with nuts, power bars, but the power bars without a bunch of artificial stuff and a bunch of preservatives and a bunch of sugar. So I try to find power bars that have low sugar, certainly low added sugar, and then high in protein, for example, and nuts. Nuts is a lifesaver. I eat a lot of nuts. That's my snacking food, and I don't have nuts right now, and I'm hungry. So we're gonna end here. I'm gonna go find some dinner, and if I can't find dinner, I've got nuts in my room. That'll be dinner. All right. Thomas says 90% of power bars are really candy bars. I know. I look for the ones that are actually not candy bars, because that's the kind I like. Dean says, I sound gay. I don't even know what that means. It sounds a little gay-phobic, but I don't know what any of that means. Right? I like nuts, and I like power bars that don't have sugar in them. I like to be healthy. I like to be in shape. I don't eat Wendy's. I don't eat McDonald's. I don't eat any of the fast food stuff. No fast food. The nuts. No, the nuts is good food. I love nuts. They taste good. They fill you. They provide nutrition. They provide calories. They provide you with healthy fats, with some protein. All right, guys, I'm not here to sell nuts to the nuts. I will see you all on Saturday. I'll be doing a show on Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Sunday, and then I'm off to Israel. Who knows? Hopefully, Boaz will have a little office for me with good internet connection where I can do a show from there. But there might be a week or so before we do a show. So this weekend, last few shows for a while. Thank you for the support. It's great. I think we did over close to 500. We did 477, which is really good. Since I'm not going to do shows for a while, I need you guys to be I need you guys to support me on the shows I do so we can meet our kind of monthly quota, monthly income, but all is good. So thanks everybody. I will see you all on Saturday. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend, and I will I'm heading to Puerto Rico tomorrow morning. So